This video came to mind because I was recently talking to a fella who turned out to be a bit of a user. Now, users are those kind of people who try to shamelessly take advantage of you. Now, there aren't that many of them, but there's enough of them that it actually spoils it for everybody and makes it a bit of a pain. Now, instead of sitting there thinking things, I've generally started to do videos on my thoughts and what I think about stuff, and this is part of that series. Now, I apologise for the noise in the background. I'm afraid it's an experiment that needs to run for about 48 hours, which is also why I've got time to do the video, and I can't turn it off. But I have arranged it so I'm leaning nearer to the microphone, and hopefully that will help the sound quality a bit better, so I apologise for that. Okay, preamble. If you go back to the Middle Ages, certainly the Middle Ages in England, because that's all I really know. If you go back to the Middle Ages, people had more of a community spirit. Now, I'm not saying that the Middle Ages was a glorious golden age, that we should all return to it. All I'm saying is that there was more of a community spirit in the Middle Ages than there is now. Now, halfway through the Middle Ages, they brought out something called the Enclosure Act. Prior to that, everybody had their own bit of land with a little bit of strip, and they put their own vegetables on there, produced the food that they needed, but population growth meant that there wasn't enough food for everybody, and this is why you got Thomas Malthus and the Great Table of Nature idea. So they brought around the Enclosure Act, where they basically closed everything off and ploughed up the little walkways and little fields that everybody was using, and because all that extra land was now suddenly used for crops, there was a tremendous abundance of crops being produced so you could feed the population. But of course it also displaced a massive amount of the population who moved into towns to work in factories. Kind of a potted history, okay? Incidentally, for the hair splitters amongst us, I don't really care what the dates are. It doesn't negate what I'm saying, and if I wanted to know them, I could just look them up in Wikipedia, so please don't tell me the exact dates. It doesn't really interest me that much. Prior to that, there was a conception of the common land. The common land was an area of land that was available to everybody. So old Farmer Joe would take his sheep up there and graze them for a little bit, herd them up, and then Farmer Sam would go along and do the same, and the whole village would do this, using the common land for the common good. Post the Enclosure Act, when everybody saw there was a bit more selfishness going on, Farmer Joe would take his sheep up there and graze them till they were full. Then he'd kick them off, Farmer Sam would go up, and there was slightly less grass than there would have been before, and so he'd graze his till they were full, and so on until the end of the line, the last poor sod that went up there, well, his sheep had no grass, so they just had to starve. Now, we see this in the modern day all the time, actually. It happens on the roads. The police study this quite a lot because, of course, it's of great interest to them. But if you're travelling on a motorway and you're travelling at 70 miles an hour and you have to brake, the person behind you has to brake, and so does the person behind. And so this braking action ripples through the whole lot of the traffic until at one point people have to stop. Now, this is a well-known effect. So when the roads are particularly busy, what they do is put in a restricted speed limit so that we all have to travel at 50 miles an hour. Now, if we kept to that, and we all travelled at 50 miles an hour, curiously enough, we would all arrive at our destination only a few minutes late. But of course that doesn't happen. What happens is some guy who thinks he's mightier than the rest zips along on the inside, pulls up in front of somebody, causes them to brake and slows everybody down. So he gets home maybe 1 or 2 minutes earlier, but the rest of us have to get home half an hour later just to let him get home a couple of minutes earlier. And this is an example of the same kind of thing that was happening post the Enclosure Act. The selfishness of one person succeeds because it rides on the back of everybody else. We all have to suffer so that that one person succeeds. And that's the problem with this paradigm. And the person who's actually doing it, well, they're big and smart and clever because they get home 2 minutes early. Haven't they done well? And the rest of us are all fools because we get home half an hour later. Or at least that's what's going on in his head. Now, obviously, I do a lot of stuff open source. And people approach that in a curious way. There actually tends to be two camps. There's one camp who think it's great and we should all share everything. And there's another camp who think it's great and they should try to take advantage. Now, I call this falling in love with the actor. I don't know if you've ever done it. You've watched a piece of theatre or you've seen a film and you've thought that that person was particularly admirable and that you'd like to be like that. And then you go and wrangle a meeting or you get behind stage and you find that, in fact, they're covered in 3 inches of makeup and they're as petulant as can be, and it can be something of a disappointment. But that's not their fault. That's your fault for imbuing that image with something more than it actually has. Now, working open source doesn't mean that I do everything open source. I just can't. I live in a modern world where I'm asked to keep secrets, and I keep those secrets. There are secrets that I think I need to keep, and I keep those too. I don't tell everything. Once you get behind the image of what you see on the screen, then you find there's something very different going on than what you originally thought. And when you look at something, you need to bear that in mind. Now, a lot of people who fall in love with the actor don't do that. They don't think about what's behind the image. So I get a lot of people who look at me doing the open source and think, well, he's a bit of a simpleton. I can take advantage of him. And that's exactly what happens. Just in the same way that people think, oh, they're driving too slowly, there's a space there, I can take advantage of it. And up they come, popping up, send me an email, trying to take advantage. Now, of course, I'm not a child, so it doesn't take me very long to suss these people out. I quite quickly learn who it is that's trying to take advantage, and it's not too difficult to notice them. One of the tricks they do is they try to shove work onto you. Whenever you're talking to somebody, if they want to do something, then they'll get off and do it. If they're attempting to take advantage of you, the first thing they'll do is try to make you do more work while they do nothing. Now, I obviously work with an awful lot of people, and I'm really pleased with some people that I work with, and they're great to work with. Some people will just pick up some of the ideas and they're off and running with it, and people like Sam Burrows, Mike Rook, Mr. Flat Hunter, Fetch It Now UK, there's a whole list of people who are just great, and I love working with them because I'm working with them. And it's easy to see. Then there's a whole group of people who come along saying, will you do this, will you do this, will you do this, will you do this? And I think, oh, for God's sake, why don't you do it? And the reason they don't do it is they're attempting to take advantage of you. Of course, that isn't strictly true for everybody. Some people don't have the skills, equipment, time or materials in order to do the experiments, and that's reasonable. But it is certainly true for some people, and it doesn't take long to have a quick look at them, see what they're doing generally, and be able to suss out whether they're just doing make work for you or wanting to join in and be part of the team. And it doesn't really happen so much in terms of the experimentation. When it really happens is when somebody comes along offering you a wonderful business opportunity. And I can't tell you how many people offer me a wonderful business opportunity. And they'll come along saying, I've got this great big client. He's going to be worth millions. He's going to really do something for you. All you've got to do is A, B, C, and D. And I think, oh, for God's sake. Now, another little wrinkle that I often come across is somebody with a great big idea and they want to sign you a non-disclosure agreement. Now, I use and sign non-disclosure agreements, and they're just agreements where you agree not to tell anybody about anything because everybody wants to keep it a secret, and that's very fair and right and proper. But when I read the NDAs that some people send me, some of them verge on the ludicrous. They'll say stuff like, I promise to work on this project, or I promise to give all of the ideas over to this person that I may or may not generate, that kind of thing. And when I read NDAs like that, I almost immediately turn off. I'll sometimes send them back amended, where I'd make it more of a two-way street. But on the whole, if an NDA comes through to me like that, I know that I'm likely to be dealing with somebody that I just don't want to be dealing with. And so in the end of the day, when I've had NDAs like that, I can guarantee I've never signed any of them, and I've never actually talked to that person again. And I'm quite okay with that, because whatever their big idea is, it's probably not as big as they think, and I'm certainly not going to sign off all the rights I might have to any idea I might generate for however long. Normally, those kind of suspicious NDAs are the ones that are in perpetuity. They have no time limit on them. So if you are getting involved in these kind of things and you're going to sign an NDA, make sure you read the bloody thing. And remember, it's a two-way street, so make changes as much as you like and send it back to them. Because if they're getting in contact with you, they want your help probably more than you want to be involved in their great big idea. It's always the same story. It's always some invisible big client. There's always some work that they want you to do, and there's always some information that they want you to give. The minute those 3 tick boxes are checked, I know that this is somebody trying to take advantage. Now, this doesn't happen only with your super entrepreneur. It also happens with students, actually. I often get written to by students saying, help me, I've got this great big dissertation, I've got this piece of work coming up, I've got this thing I really must do by then and I don't know where to turn. And I think, okay, what are they looking for help? And I write and ask them, and it comes back, oh, can you please design an experiment for me, tell me what I should be looking for, how to do it, and what results I should be getting. And I think, for God's sake, man, What do you mean, write your dissertation for you? It's not going to happen. I mean, I'll give general guidance on such things, certainly. I'm not going to write anybody's dissertation. Equally, I'm not going to help anybody build a business empire. It's just not going to happen. I don't know what these people are thinking. So how do you spot somebody who's taking advantage of you, or trying to take advantage of you? It's quite simple, actually. Normally, they'll be shoving a lot of work onto you. They'll try to get you to do things. They won't tell you any specifics. It'll all be very vague about some great big plan, some possibility of millions in the bank, that kind of thing. Another thing they'll try to do is try to wow you with their credentials. They'll tell you how important they are, who is it they know, how many mighty people and great shakers they have dinner with, and a long list of qualifications that they may or may not have. They probably do. When you're dealing with genuine people, honest people, they don't feel the need to do such things. You'll find out as you talk to them about what kind of credentials they've got. You'll find out about what they can do, but they certainly don't need to tell you straight off. They're actually more interested in the work that you're doing, and they'll work on it themselves because it's something they're interested in. And if you're open and sharing with those people, they'll be open and sharing with you. Later on, you'll find out about them, but you'll find out about them just as the course of what you're doing. You won't find out about them because they tell you all about them and how wonderful they are. So I have two views of people. Now, I've talked about contradictory views and living with them, so these are contradictory. Live with them. I have one view of people where they're basically all penguins huddled together in the snow to keep themselves warm, and I have another view of people where they're all chimpanzees at a tea party throwing their own feces at each other. And both views seem to apply sometimes. I have said before that I like to judge people in terms of what they can do, what they're actually doing, as opposed to what they can tell me they can do, or what they tell me about themselves. Normally I pay no attention to that at all, but normally I pay attention to what people are actually doing and what people do from when we get involved with each other. That's how I judge people. Now, it tends to be pretty quick that you can discover that somebody is a penguin or a chimpanzee. It doesn't take very long to find out whether they want to huddle in the snow or throw their feces at you. Really, don't get me wrong. I've got nothing against building a business and making money out of ideas. I think it's right and proper. What I'm arguing against is the user, that person who's trying to take advantage of you. Now, there aren't that many people who do that, but there are enough people who do that you have to be careful. Because I work in open source, people think I'm not careful. Well, I am. I make sure, as well as I'm able, that I don't get involved with users. What I tend to do is give them the runaround. I talk to them for quite a while, shove the make work back onto them to get them to do some work, and at the end of the day tell them to get lost. It's just my joke with them. And it's perhaps a little unkind, but I can't tell you how much I despise that kind of person. If we work together, we will succeed. If you work together and create a business, that's great. You deserve to make some money. If you want to use people, according to me, you deserve locking up. So this has been quite a ramble, so let's sum up. A user is relatively easy to spot. There's somebody who will try to blind you with their qualifications. There's somebody who will shove work onto you. There's somebody who has an amazing client and a great business opportunity. Or there's somebody who's just pretty lazy and trying to get you to do the work for them. So they're not that difficult to spot. To me, a user is the most despicable of people. There aren't that many of them, but there are enough that you have to be careful. Just because you work in open source doesn't mean that you're a simpleton. So if you're watching this and you think that, you probably need to readdress those views. And hopefully this has been of some interest to people, and thank you very much for watching.